come on. Oh, come on. Jesus. Why don't you just fucking die? Ugh. Ugh. Fucking finally. What time is it? Oh shit. I've got to do a video. So here's the thing. Dan Slott's run on Spider-Man can kind of easily be broken into 4 sort of seasons, for want of a better word, which is kind of the way all comics at Marvel are going now. It's like they restart from number 1 a lot more frequently, and they're sort of like seasons of television. But this first season, so to speak, is difficult to break up further, not because the stories don't make sense on their own, but because basically Dan Slott is building a new status quo for Spider-Man, and each volume and story sort of feeds into the next and pulls from the last, as well as from the history of Spider-Man. So I'm kind of just going to talk about, well, a big old chunk of it. We're basically going to talk about the first 11 volumes of Dan Slott's Spider-Man, which encompasses Amazing Spider-Man issues 648 to issue 700. Yeah, that's a lot of Spidey. For those of you reading along in trades, those volumes are Big Time, Matters of Life and Death, The Fantastic Spider-Man, The Return of Anti-Venom, Spider Island, Flying Blind, Trouble on the Horizon, Ends of the Earth, Lizard, No Turning Back, Danger Zone, and Dying Wish. So first off, a bit of background. So what happened after the end of J. Michael Straczynski's run, which I've talked about before, is we had the very controversial One More Day storyline, which got rid of Peter's marriage, rewrote some of his history with Mary Jane, changed some things here and there to save an ancient woman, because just let Aunt May die, let her go. She's so old. She's older than balls. After One More Day, J. Michael Straczynski left the title, not happy with the place it was left in. What Marvel decided to do was take all the different Spider-Man books that were being published. So you had Amazing, Peter Parker Spider-Man, I think you had Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, Sensational Spider-Man. Thought, we don't need all these Spider-Man titles. We'll just take Amazing Spider-Man and publish it 3 times a month. And that's what they did. So we got a sort of brain trust of Spidey writers. So to start off, you had Dan Slott, and he was joined by Bob Gale, Matt Guggenheim, Fred Van Lente, Zeb Wells, and there was a bunch of different artists rotating in and out of the book, because of course you can't have an artist draw a book if it's coming out 3 times a month. And what you got was, it was called Brand New Day at first, so you had lots of new ideas, new characters, new villains. I think they were forbidden for the first year or something from using old villains. Had to use new stuff. So that was pretty well received. Mark Waid came on later on, and he did the Gauntlet, where Spider-Man basically faced the gauntlet of his old villains. That was pretty damn good. That led up to Grim Hunt. And what happened in 2011, or the end of 2010, it started being published in 2011, is Marvel decided to make Spider-Man twice a monthly and give it to one writer, and that one writer was Dan Slott. The really interesting thing that Dan Slott does with this first season of his run on the character is he builds a new status quo for Spider-Man, and he does it by taking aspects of the character that might not have been explored, at least to this degree before, and just running with them. First off being the science aspect of Peter Parker. The man's a science genius, and Big Time really brings up that notion and runs with it to the point of having him become part of a brain trust, a think tank at Horizon Labs, which is sort of a New York tech company which is uniting the best and brightest minds, sort of a Google, Apple sort of fusion idea thing. And it sort of runs with that idea of Peter Parker as a super scientist and brings the tech aspect of Spider-Man more to the forefront, which is something that we saw explored a little bit in Spider-Man Homecoming, and also was part of the reason I didn't have the problem some people did with Spidey having a high-tech suit in that, because we see him explore that in this, especially after, in Matters of Life and Death, he loses his spider sense. Now, the loss of his spider sense is only temporary, but it still leads us to some interesting stories as we see him sort of try to fill in the gaps that he's taken for granted. Things like being able to swing from building to building without falling or making a bad swing, a bad web shot, being able to dodge bullets, things like that. So seeing him use technology to plug some of those gaps, as well as sort of train himself to overcome what he feels are his own shortcomings, it gives it a nice bit of that old Spider-Man downtrodden feel without having his life be downtrodden. I mean, he's working at Horizon Labs now, he's making good money, the freelance photographer angle, the down on his luck thing is kind of out of the window. So it's about making him more successful as a character by overcoming things that he's struggled with in the past, but then giving him new challenges to face. And newness, is that a word? It is now. Newness is sort of a big theme of this first season of Dan Slott's Spider-Man. It's new challenges, although sometimes with old villains, a lot of old villains actually. And I guess that brings us to the next reason about why I love Dan Slott's run so much. Dan Slott knows his Spider-Man, loves the character, and it's clear in the way he writes him. But what is also really smart about this first, again I'm going to use that term, season of Spider-Man from Dan, is that he references the older Spider-Man while moving him forward. So he roots him in his past and moves him into new territory. And it's things like having him save John Jameson from a wayward space capsule like he did in the very first issue of Spider-Man, and then making a direct reference to it. There's lots of really nice moments where he goes, oh, this is just like that time when, and you get like a little splash of that original art. And it really helps cement this as a Spider-Man who's grown, who's learned. There's a whole thing in comics of what people tend to do is take a character and reset them to an earlier point in their life. It happens all the time. So what's really nice to see here is Slott take the character, acknowledge his past, and move him forward. New challenges, new settings, new status quo, and new characters. And we get a great supporting cast. Peter's Horizon Labs compadres, Max Modell, Uatu, not the Watcher, a kid called Uatu because he has hippie parents. Again, just acknowledging that the Marvel Universe has these crazy beings that exist and influence culture in small ways, like having a kid named Uatu because his parents know who the Watcher is, or have seen the Watcher on like news reports of the coming of Galactus, things like that. It's a great way of building a supporting cast. You've got holdovers from the Brand New Day era, like his new girlfriend Carly Cooper, seeing his relationship develop with her, as well as his sort of friendly relationship with Mary Jane develop. The tension between him and J. Jonah Jameson, who's now mayor of New York, as well as got Peter blacklisted from being a photographer. There's a whole thing in Brand New Day where J. Jonah Jameson asks Peter to doctor some photos for him to help cover up a scandal. Peter reluctantly does, and then JJ drops him in it and gets him blacklisted, so he can't take photos for papers anymore. As a whole thing, and the tension coming off the back of that, plus him being the mayor of New York, plus him still being anti-Spider-Man, plus then in one of the early arcs, his wife gets killed by Alistair Smythe. There's a whole relationship there which is interesting in a new dynamic. You've got John Jameson, or J. Jonah Jameson Sr., JJ's father, is married to Aunt May now. And it's just playing with all these family relationships and that the web of Peter's supporting cast, which has always been a strong part of the book when it's at its best. And again, running with that in new directions and taking it to interesting places. In the Fantastic Spider-Man, we see yet another development for the character. Basically, what had happened over in Fantastic Four, when Jonathan Hickman was writing it, Johnny Storm was presumed dead. In his will, he leaves his place on the team to Peter, Spider-Man, and then Spidey joins the team as they become the Future Foundation. Really good Fantastic Four run, something I'll talk about sometime in the future. But it has a knock-on effect in this book by seeing some of Peter's adventures with the Future Foundation, bringing the Fantastic Four back into the supporting cast of Spider-Man, again like they were from the very first issue, and you get that callback to that very first issue. Again, just cementing Spider-Man's history as well as moving him forward just makes this a really, really good run. And it's like that Fantastic Spider-Man's a great little adventure, and also sets up some of the villainy that's going to come later, because as much as any run has had a big bad, this first season of Dan Slott Spider-Man has a real big bad. You get some really nice stuff from classic villains in this run, but head and shoulders above them all is Doc Ock. At the head of a new Sinister Six, although made up of classic members of the Sinister Six, there's no curveballs there. Doc Ock is engineering things from behind the scenes to manipulate his way into a goal that at first you don't understand. It's not until the very final arc of the series that you really begin to understand Ock's plan. This is a Doc Ock who is desperate. I mean, everyone's seen the stuff of Dr. Octopus as this pudgy, out of shape Roy Orbison lookalike with extra arms, and he's apparently going toe-to-toe with Spider-Man. What Dan Slott did in the Brain Trust era, the Brain Trust did in the Brain Trust era, I guess, when there was all the rotating writers, is take that idea and go, okay, well, Doc Ock's an average guy, super smart scientist, but physically an average dude, and he's been taking knocks from Spider-Man, who's super strong, for years. That would make him ill. And so they come up with the idea that Ock is dying, his body is literally failing. So he's got a series of schemes as last-ditch attempts to cement his legacy, win his ultimate victory. And we see a lot of that play out through Dan Slott's run, culminating in the final arc of this season, and the final arc of Amazing Spider-Man for a couple of years, Dying Wish.
God, it's heavy.
Now, everything sort of leads up to Dying Wish. It's the culmination of what Dan started with Big Time. And so there's some slight spoilers here, but I mean, this is a big run that's gone on for 6 years, so I'm going to call statute of limitations on this, because it also sets up what comes next, which is really interesting. We're not going to get into the Superior Spider-Man on this time. I think that warrants an episode of its own, if not more. But so we're going to talk a little bit about Dying Wish, because I love it. So Dying Wish basically sets up the idea that through all of his machinations, Doc Ock has sort of built himself a back door into Peter's mind, and using his little Octobots has swapped bodies. So Peter Parker is trapped in Otto Octavius' dying body, while Otto is driving Peter's, in its prime, super-powered Spidey body. And the last 3 issues of the series, which is collected in the Dying Wish trade, 698, 699, 700, basically is the story of Peter realising that, Ock gloating, and Peter doing everything he can to get back into his own body, and failing. Amazing Spider-Man 700 ends, well, the main story ends, with Peter in Doc Ock's body, dying in the arms of Peter Parker, who is now inhabited by Otto Octavius' consciousness, leaving the Spider-Man mantle to Otto Octavius. So Peter in Doc Ock's body becomes the Uncle Ben figure to Doc Ock in Peter's body. It's great, and everything, and you go back through the run and you see that all the little bits and pieces that lead up to that, like setting up the Octobots, setting up the neural interface that it goes both ways. You see that in Ends of the Earth, and the sort of desperation that Ock feels, and he keeps talking about how he's got plans within plans. You see a bit of that within the Fantastic Spider-Man. It does show off his master planner abilities, as well as his big arms, because he's basically a frail husk at this point in a set of arms. I mean, Doc Ock is an iconic Spider-Man villain, and to see him sort of recur throughout this run with great stories, and then culminate in an actual victory. It's really inspired, and that sort of arc that moves across the whole season of these books, I think it just makes for really great stories, and that's what I want from comics. Is what I want from Spider-Man. I just want great stories, and I think Dan delivers that in spades with this first part of his run. You also get the fantastic Spider Island story that's smack bang in the middle of this first section of Dan's run, and that is basically what if everyone on Manhattan got spider powers, and runs with that idea. It ties in the new Venom, which this run helps set up, and it pulls a lot from the Spidey technology angle. It goes back into the Spider Queen stuff from pre-JMS Spider-Man Disassembled. Again, just pulling back into history and then bringing that into the new status quo and playing with different ideas and just doing things in really interesting ways. I'm not going to talk too much about Spider Island. I think that might warrant its own episode in the future, but that's sort of that and Dying Wish are sort of the gemstones of this particular first run. But that's not to take away from the other stories in this, because I wouldn't even say anything a solid. I would say everything from Big Time through to Dying Wish is a real banger of a story. I mean, Big Time comes in with the guns blazing, matters of life and death, gives everything an emotional punch. Fantastic Spider-Man gives you that FF relationship renewal and some great sort of sciencey stories. They get a Psycho Man arc where he turns up with the Avengers Academy kids and as a substitute teacher and fights Psycho Man. That leads into Spider Island, of course, after the return of Anti-Venom, where Anti-Venom turns back up again. You get the Wraith, the new Wraith, and the reveal of who that is. And sort of that sort of vigilante villain dichotomy is explored a little bit. Flying Blind reintroduces the Vulture, the original old school Vulture, and makes him a menacing villain once again. Trouble on the Horizon is a really cool sort of sci-fi time travel-y story that explores the Horizon Labs cast a little bit more. And then what we've got Ends of the Earth, which is a great globe-trotting Doc Ock story, which helps set up Dying Wish. Lizard, No Turning Back. Some people get a bit jaded about it. Oh, basically, they're just tied into the Amazing Spider-Man and maybe the movie, of course. And maybe that's a little bit true, but it's also a great story that takes the Lizard to new places. And you know, No Turning Back is both a literal and figurative title for what happens in that story. And so, as I say, takes Kurt Connors into new territory. Interesting stuff. Danger Zone is the culmination of the Hobgoblin rivalry arc that's been brewing since Big Time. Phil Urich, former hero Green Goblin, becomes a new villainous Hobgoblin for the Kingpin. The original Hobgoblin comes back, they vie for supremacy, and then that leads directly into Dying Wish, which, as I've explained, ends fabulously with a whole reversal of Doc Ock and Peter, and sets up the Superior Spider-Man, which is great, and I will talk about another time. So let's talk about art. There are many great artists on this run, and I don't want to throw shade on anyone, because everyone does a great job. But Humberto Ramos kind of steals it. I mean, it seems like he's Dan Slott's kind of go-to guy. He draws a fair chunk of Superior Spider-Man. He draws the revival of Amazing Spider-Man that came after Superior. And I think he's done a big chunk of Worldwide. That might be Camuncoli. I don't know. I'll have to check. He definitely does big chunks of Amazing Spider-Man post Superior, and chunks of Superior along with Ryan Stegman and Giuseppe Camuncoli. Giuseppe Camuncoli draws a couple of arcs of this as well. Him and Stefano Caselli kind of have a beefier feel to Spider-Man, make him a bit more muscular. Giuseppe Camuncoli draws the best faces. He just draws the best faces, although he gets to play with it more in Superior Spider-Man. Every artist pulls out all the stops on this season. I don't think there's any dodgy art. And sometimes with a book that gets a lot of rotating artists in and out, you sometimes get that sense of, oh, well, this one doesn't up to scratch, this one doesn't up to scratch. There are some styles that you might not like. I love Humberto Ramos's sort of jagged and expressionistic style. No one's proportions are quite right, and everything's a bit too cartoony for some people maybe, but I love the kinetic feel of it, the way everything just comes with motion lines and blur motion lines. The faces, it's very Joe Madureira, it's very anime inspired, it's very Chris Bacalo, which are all artists that I love, so it really does something for me. Of course, some of his female characters are a bit on the cheesecakey side, so you have to take with the rough with the smooth. I'm not massively keen on that stuff, but his art as a whole is pretty damn great. He draws the first part of Big Time, he draws Dying Wish, he draws most of Spider Island, so the really high points in this run are also happen to be drawn by Humberto Ramos. Like I say, Stefano Caselli and Giuseppe Camuncole do some great work on this. And I think I also want to point out, however briefly, Javier Pulido does a couple of stories here and there throughout the run. I think Javier Pulido might in fact be the reincarnation of Jack Kirby, because he just has that feel to him, those sort of craggy faces and mean looks, and there's something so primal about his art, and I think a lot of people will just get put off by it because of its simplicity. But I think I see so much of like old Jack Kirby in that art that I can't not love it. So I just want to also give a shout out to Javier Pulido for doing some great work on this run. He also does some great work on Matt Fraction's Hawkeye. There's a couple of issues of that. Just go check out Javier Pulido. He does great stuff. Yeah, but the art on this season is just stunning. Just the team of artists they get really pulls out all the stops, and you get Spidey at his kinetic best. Great action, fluid movement, wonderful designs for the new suits that he builds throughout the period of the run. And of course, working at Horizon Labs, he takes that into advantage and builds new suits all the time, and it's great. We get the Big Time suit with the glowy Tron lines. You've got the bulletproof suit from Matters of Life and Death, and of course you've got the Ends of the Earth armor, Avenger armor, which is really cool. This is a great looking run, and even if you don't like Dan Slott's writing, because some people don't, why not? It's great. Then this is worth checking out just for the artwork. I mean, they capture Spider-Man so well across a range of different styles. That's the strength of it visually, is the diversity on display. And yet it all feels like Spider-Man. That's the really impressive thing. Every different person draws Peter differently, but they all draw him like Peter. Every person draws Spidey differently, but they all draw him like Spidey. You know who MJ is. You can tell who Carly is. You know who Max is. You know, JJ is always JJ. Aunt May is always Aunt May, even though they're drawn differently. And they're all drawn so well. It's a beautiful looking run. Visually arresting is the words I would use to describe it. It's just so well worth your time. As I say, this is 11 volumes of Spider-Man that I'm talking about here. So, if you want to read it, it could be a bit expensive. There are a few different ways to do it. You can get your trades either physically or digitally. I read everything digital, so I get it from Comixology. You can also get on over to Marvel's Comics Unlimited, pay their yearly subscription fee, you get access to their entire back catalogue. So all of this stuff is on there, plus Superior Spider-Man, plus the Amazing Spider-Man relaunch that came after that, plus a good chunk of the current Amazing Spider-Man series. However you read it, I just implore you to do so. It's such a great exploration of what makes Spider-Man great, and acknowledges all the great stuff that's come in the past, and just moves him forward. I mean, that's the most exciting thing about it for me, is it moves the character forward in a really meaningful way after he was regressed so much in Brand New Day and One More Day. I really like the strength of Dan Slott's ideas. I mean, he pulls a lot from sci-fi bits here and there, British sci-fi like Doctor Who, British comedy stuff. He's a funny writer. His Spider-Man is funny, and yet also has a deep-rooted emotional core and a pathos, which Spider-Man should always have a sort of balance between the two. I think Spider-Man Homecoming did that really nicely, the movie, and also I think Amazing Spider-Man overdid the pathos a little bit, but was good with the snark and the funniness. Yeah, it's just really, really strong, enjoyable, fun Spider-Man comics. And I don't know what more you want from Spider-Man. Like, are you asking for... You're not going after grim and gritty. You're not going after sort of soul-searching, painful, tortured hero stuff. It's Spider-Man, and he's fun and colourful and lively and gets up to ridiculous adventures, and that's exactly what this run delivers in spades. So please, however you do it, go check it out. It's great. I love it. I love Dan Slott's Spider-Man. It's so good. Also, once you read this, then go and read Superior Spider-Man, because that's amazing, and we will talk about that at some point in the future. And I say some point in the future because I honestly don't know when, because this is going to be the last Big Damn Love me and Chris do for a little bit. We're just going to try some different ideas. We're going to come back to Big Damn Love, don't worry. We're bringing it back. But we're going to put it on a little hiatus so we can try some different ideas for content we've got. Also, because of the way we lead our lives, we can only do so much content at a time. So we kind of need to retire something for a little bit so we can try some new stuff. So thank you for watching Big Damn Love so far. It will return. Thanks for all your support. Thanks for watching. As you always know, you can get in touch with us. Comments below at BigDamnCast on Twitter, BigDamnContact@gmail.com. The podcast is still coming every Thursday on iTunes, every Friday on YouTube. Don't you worry. I've got Adventures in Backlogging that's coming up, and we'll have some new bits and pieces for you very soon. But thank you for watching Big Damn Love, the whole series, and particularly this ranty, unscripted episode on Dan Slott's Amazing Spider-Man. Which is amazing. Ta-ta for now. Alright, that's all done with.
I made it! I'm here! Oh, I'm here! I'm not too late, right? I brought them all. The Dan Slott, all the Slott.
What?
The whole Slott.
Chris, you know I've got everything digitally, right? So what are you on about?
Dan Slott, you're doing the episodes, I thought. Might need the research.
Right.
You said bring it over, so...
No, I didn't.
But look! Look!
There we are. Got them all, look. See? Got the Spider Island. There's big time over there.
Chris.
Dying Wish.
Chris. Chris.
Yeah.
I didn't ask you to do this. I have all these. I already have them.
No, you did.
I've read them.
You did. You got in touch and you said bring all the books. I have to bring the books. They need to be a focal point of what you're doing.
I told you no such thing.
Well, then who did? See, I don't know, because that doesn't actually make any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not scary, it's
No,
not intimidating. The music made it sound a bit, but
No.
it's because he wasn't in the last two videos.
Really?
Yeah, that's it.
Sad. Sad.
There he is. Just put that back down.
Well, that was an anticlimax, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Let's have a good coffee.